Good afternoon, everyone. So we are very excited to have Orna Grinman on here today. We will be sharing her testimony about a book. So welcome, Orna.
Welcome everyone. Shalom.
Yeah, shalom indeed, and a pleasant afternoon, and so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for making the time. So just a quick intro on Orna. So she is the founder of Ot Umufet Ministries in Israel, and she really has a on her heart to unite the house of Israel and the house of Judah together as one bride for the coming Messiah of our one groom and our one Messiah. And then she also wrote this wonderful book, which I can truly recommend you read. It's so foundational to our identity as followers of the way, as followers of Messiah. And it really will root your identity deeper in Him as you read and uncover this book. And give you a sense of identity in where do I fit into Yahweh's plan? What is my role and what is the relationship between Israel and the Gentiles, the Jews and the Gentiles? So, yeah, Orna, we are very excited to learn more about you and to hear your story and your testimony. So, please just give us a brief introduction of who you are.
So again, Shalom. From the center, very center of Jerusalem, this is where I live. Um,
Sure.
yeah, so that my story started, I was born in Israel to a Jewish family on both sides. And for me, anything that had to do with Christianity or Jesus was out of limits, out of question. We do read some
Mm,
portions of the New Testament in high school, but that's just for the sake of history and general knowledge. About
mm,
41 years ago, I finished my army service. I traveled to South Africa, and there I met in Vicksburg, for those of you from South Africa, really middle of nowhere, I met this Christian family. They invited me to stay with them for a while, which was odd, but I took advantage of any invitation. Girl without a
mm,
lot of budget, why not? And they seemed to be so safe and nice. So I moved in and I was really impressed with what I saw, what they called a relationship with God. Now, in my understanding, God is not someone you talk to. If you have any questions, you go to the rabbis. But really, who cares to have questions with God? Because I moved into their house a total atheist. And if I had any
mm,
questions, you check history, you check the encyclopedia, no Wikipedia that day, but it's not even an option. And it's not something they were talking about as much as it was something they were living and doing. I could see in during breakfast, questions would come up, and somehow
mm,
around the day, somehow along the day, when they met again for dinner, things happened. And some of them I thought maybe manipulating, circumstances, but a lot of them I couldn't explain. Um, and so a couple of weeks later, I just realized hiking one of the hills around the city, you know what? There is God. God exists. Faith comes by hearing, and I can't explain the logical process I went to. It was just a moment of
mm,
revelation watching them. And today I can say they provoke jealousy in me. That's a language I didn't have back then, but that's really what they did. Um, Also, this back then it was time of apartheid. The way they treat that was very hard for me. I came from such
mm,
a socialistic Israel, in her young decades. We were such a socialistic society, and it blew my mind, that apartheid thing. But the way they treated the blacks was unique. And again, they referred that to their faith in God and their relationship in Him. So that was another thing that impressed me. And once I told them, okay, there is a God. I mean, he's not Christian. His name is not Jesus. There is a Jewish God. I take that. They suggested that I'll
Mm.
ask him some questions about the Jewish Messiah. And I did that totally out of courtesy to them, just because they were so hospitable. I really didn't care to find the answer. But he answered. Took 3 days. And then when the answer came, using my Bible, they managed to find some Hebrew script with huge letters, which took two big volumes, and one little New Testament, which they probably had prepared for me for in the past 2 weeks that I've been with them. And I just flipped the pages, and everywhere I opened them, the word Messiah appeared. And my question was, is he the Jewish Messiah? And it's again and again and again I asked that. And it seemed to be like a yes,
Mm.
yes, 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 yes.
Sure.
That
Wow.
was during the night, the middle of the night, and that was not happy event for me at all. It was
Mm.
frightening. It was a crisis. I did not know I can remain Jewish. Immediately, I thought I was sure I lost my nationality, my identity,
Mm.
and
Sure.
definitely my family. I was sure all of these things are lost.
Mm.
Um, and that started a big spiritual warfare over me throughout the night. It took a while
Yeah.
until I got my understanding right, a long time. I came back home a few months later, and back then we were such a small body here, maybe 200 all over the country. So our understanding of I not having to convert to another religion, but going back to the Jewish roots was just in the beginning steps of it.
Mm.
That was my experience.
Sure. And I can think it was quite difficult going back to your own country, not knowing how your family will react, um, having to tell them that, yeah, you found the Messiah.
I didn't do that immediately. It took me almost 6 months until I knew
Sure.
God is pushing me and He's not letting that go anymore.
Mm.
And so I prepared a great meal for them and invited them all over and very cautiously said that. And I was quite surprised with the reaction, actually. I waited
Yeah.
for a fight. I expected a fight. Yeah.
But it's
Yeah, they
awesome how the Father already prepared their hearts for you to
yeah.
tell them. Sure.
Prepared me because at that point, 6 months later, I had a little more understanding. I had a support group
Okay.
here. I joined a congregation, so there were people praying with me. The only one who really surprised me and reacted harsh was we're four sisters, so she's number two. And she decided to prove me wrong. So she took the Old Testament and started reading it, and she said she'll mark every verse that says the opposite. And she
Sure.
ended that journey with her being born again. And
Oh,
that, yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Sure.
And
That's amazing.
now, 41 years later, actually only one sister has not been born again, but she loves
Sure.
being around us. She constantly has questions, and
Mm. Mm.
yeah.
So the
So
Father is working with her as well.
he was very faithful with our family, both
Sure.
sisters and husbands and children and my parents. So even going back a generation, I don't take that for
Sure.
granted. Yeah.
And it's special how he secluded you as well in South Africa, in, as you say, in a small town in the middle of nowhere, and that's where he met with you. So Orna, is that where your journey with the Father started?
Yes, totally. You see, I think what happened to me is typical to my generation of Messianic Jews,
Okay,
especially if we were the first ones in the family to be born again, to find the love of the
sure.
Father. It seemed like he had to isolate us, send us out of the
Mm,
country,
mm,
put us in a Christian surrounding, because it is revolutionary to our minds and
yeah,
upbringing. So yeah, that's how my journey started.
sure. That is profound. And I think it's such a big responsibility as well that you have to now that you know the truth, you have to go out and you have to go and tell the truth. And I think in the beginning, where you explained this in the beginning of your book as well, you really draw us into the story of these feelings that you might have had and how you had these questions and you got a yes upon a yes upon a yes that he is the Jewish Messiah. Jesus is the Jewish Messiah.
Yeah.
So, Orna, tell us a bit more about your heart behind the book.
Yeah. Um, I started about 23 years ago traveling often. Up to that point, I
Okay.
had a business. I wasn't running a ministry, but when God called me to minister, a part of it involved teaching the nations about Israel as a widow. It's a whole concept, and we'll
Okay.
touch on that when we get to Ruth and Naomi tomorrow when we start there. And I started traveling and I had bases, in different places that I used to visit, especially in America. And these were people who are so well acquainted with what the Bible teaches about Israel. I learned endlessly from them. They would visit Israel so often. They were invested, deeply invested in
Okay.
Israel and the Messianic body. And after years of doing that, one of them asks me pretty frustrated. I could see they were pretty frustrated. Um, Asked me, why is it so hard to see changes among the Messianic Jews? Why does it take so much hard work? And especially, why does it take so much work to get one Jew saved, especially
Mm.
in Israel? Because they had some data. And I was surprised by the question because for me that was very obvious. I said, oh, because of the
Mm.
hidden faces. And they said, what? And because they were so knowledgeable, I thought they knew what I was talking about. Anyway, we went into the concept and I realized it's not such a well known among the Gentiles. To the Jews,
Mm.
it is because even the rabbis speak that language. They speak about the hidden
Okay.
faces of God. And also, when we read the Bible in Hebrew, the word faces, referring to God's characteristic, is all over the place. But only then, when I tried to explain it to them and we started digging into the word, I realized that most of the places that say faces in Hebrew are translated into countenance or presence in English. So it is hidden
Okay.
from
Mm.
those who read the Bible in other language. There's a whole truth there.
Sure.
There's a whole jewel there. And then I realized oh, yeah, that one of these friends said, I send $1,000 to Israel and maybe you have $500 left. He was referring to the high taxes we pay. He says, I
Okay.
send $1,000 to Vietnam or somewhere there. They buy 3 scooters and they evangelize the entire mountain area very
Mm.
quickly. He wanted to explain the level of frustration and the
Mm.
difference. And I thought, "Hey, we have such faithful Ruth here, and a fear got into me that some of our greatest lovers can turn quickly into an Orpah. Because you see in this story,
Mm.
Ruth and Naomi, you have those 2 widows that love her. Both of them want to see her restored, but one of them gets tired on the way or just prefers her comfort zone, and basically she walks out of the story. I'm sure, I mean, I don't know really, the Bible doesn't tell us, but Orpah's life after she left Naomi might have been pretty much, she may have remarried or, sent maybe, I don't know what she did with her life, but it was definitely not as hard as Ruth, a stranger.
Mm.
Ruth didn't, when Ruth crosses the Jordan River back with Naomi, she doesn't know what the future is going,
Yeah.
that we are going to remember forever. and she's going to be the great grandmother of. No, she thinks a life of gleaning, poverty, and serving a bitter widow. And it takes a high level of commitment to serve a bitter, and we can play the role of a bitter widow very well. And it takes a lot of faithfulness to stay on our side. So that sparked me, that got me to write the book. I wanted people to understand their place in the story, and basically to call you all to patience. Be patient with us. Don't walk out of the story. For our sake, for your sake, but mostly for the sake
Yeah,
of the story.
absolutely. And for the sake of God's plan with the story as well.
That's what I mean. The kingdom, for the
Yeah,
sake of the kingdom. Yeah.
absolutely. No, that yeah, that's amazing, Orna. And I think it's so important for us to understand, and the fact that you link it to the story of Ruth and Naomi makes it practical for us to understand it also a little bit more, because it paints a picture. That's so wonderful about the God that we serve, is he knows that he created us as picture thinkers. So he gives us a lot of pictures in the Bible so that we can go and study it to understand it. Um, so yeah, that is how the book journey started. But what I want to ask you from the book as well, is there anything else? I know we're going to dive deeply into Ruth and Naomi in our series over the next 4 weeks. So on that, for all of those on the video and those who will listen to the recording, please join us from tomorrow morning at 5:30 a.m. SA time. I think that's 6:30 a.m. Israeli time, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Then Orna will take us through the journey of Ruth and Naomi in detail. So before we close, I just want to ask you, Orna, is there anything else that you want to highlight from the book for the readers or potential readers as well?
Yeah. Wait, let me pull out my little diamond, which I like to use to explain that. Let's see if the camera. So obviously it's transparent, but I don't know if you see that it consists of many, many, many angles, triangles. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So I love that, triangles, Trinity, and all of that. And what we have, I like to compare it to the faces of God, because at the beginning of the story in the Old Testament, he shows, when I say faces, and I say it in plural because in Hebrew it's a plural noun. It's not face, it's faces, sides, angles, or rather characteristics. So he shows most of his characteristics to the Jews. Even though it's not accurate, because really God's revelation is gradual. Every book, shares one more thing about him, and especially the New Testament. But at the beginning of the story, he reveals himself to the Jews, and if a Gentile wanted to worship him, they had to join the Jewish nation. When we are about to enter the promised land after the end of Exodus, after 40 years in the desert, he warns Moses. He doesn't even warn, he proclaims a punishment. He says, they will enter the land, they will play harlots with the gods of the land, and I will hide my faces. And what I do in this book, I explain that this is a national punishment, and that the faces of God are really reflected. It's transparent. It's not, so it is reflected through Yeshua, through the Messiah. And when you read the Old Testament in Hebrew and you follow up on all these faces occurrences, you realize it's not a mask that covers, it's not an object, it's a person. And that a part of the punishment is God hiding this reflection, this part of who he is from the Jews once we start worshiping idols. And when you read Ezekiel 39, you realize that the end of the punishment is at the very end of human history, the era that we're at. It's not when Yeshua walked on earth, even. In a way, he is still hidden from us. So it's odd because, we walk the places he walked, but I did it. I traveled through Tiberias and Golgotha and other places all my life. And until I hosted some Christians here, I didn't understand what's all the excitement about. For me, that's a dead stone. That's before I was saved. And even today, actually, I still struggle to rip off from that all the religious that envelopes it. But that's another matter. So we are under that punishment, and God gradually, one by one, like he did with me and my family and the others that believe in Yeshua now, the Jews, he reveals back his faces, that part of him, the Messiah. Now, when he hid it from us, it's like a bowl that turned around. He revealed it to the Gentiles. And that blew up the mind of Paul. That's what Paul understood. That's the secret, the big secret that he already all of a sudden understood, that they can see what now is hidden from us.
Sure.
What is happening today? Well, while God was hiding that from us, he was also hiding from the Gentiles that he is hiding it from us. Which is why Christian theology that developed throughout centuries focuses on replacement theology. They they couldn't put together what's happening with the Jews in Israel and God's promises. And also the problematic translations that had hidden this truth. And God is now revealing to both Jews and Gentiles. You see what happened to me in South Africa? I saw in my hosts a side of Yeshua that was totally the opposite of what I was trained to see. I saw him as the lover of their soul. I realized he is safe, that he is alive, that he answers prayers. Masks were taken off my face and my understanding. I think Gentiles go through a similar experience to realize that the part of God that they believe is the God of Israel. That you can't separate.
Absolutely. I think it's so true. As you uncover the truth of God's word, we see the parts of his face that you have always seen. Gradually that starts to uncover for us as well, to see that we have a Jewish Messiah and why he did certain things and why it's core to our faith, and how if we dig deep and understand those truths about why he did what he did, we'll get to know him a little bit better as well.
Exactly. And also back to my diamond, only when we reflect, when we look at him fully, we reflect one another. So we can see there is something missing to the Jews that was never meant to be there, that the Gentiles have, and vice versa. I saw my Messiah in the face and relationship they had with God, because I couldn't see him straight. And so the story needs both of us. I'm running ahead of myself, but we will see during this month how Ruth needed Naomi and Naomi needed Ruth in order to end up at the house of the Redeemer.
Sure.
They couldn't do it alone.
Absolutely. We do need each other, and Abba called us together as one nation. And I think it's really, you can see in the times that we're living in, the two nations also starting to unite more and more. And we are very excited for this journey with you, Orna. I think before I just close and say where you can find your book, just tell us a little bit more about Ot Umupet, your ministry, and what your heart is behind your ministry.
The niche that God had called me to has to do with what I what I call the widowhood of Israel. Israel is a widow not because she doesn't have a husband, but because she doesn't have a relationship with her husband and she doesn't acknowledge him as such. But then God promises, Isaiah 54:4, that the day will come when we will not remember the reproach of a widowhood anymore. And it's a process. He restores us back to the land. He starts restoring us back to himself. He will pour out his spirit. He will bring justice and peace and all of that. And God is calling me. By now I figured it out. It seems like every few years he calls me to another area in our society or our nation or even the messianic body that is broken. And through my own story, I'm a single mom. So through my own story of restoration, and I have one son, and we needed big time because there was just brokenness on all levels. God used the tabernacle of Moses. That's the format, the tool, the main tool I use in ministry today. But through that, he taught me how we can turn anything that is in the desert, dusty and broken, bring it into the Holy of Holies, whether it's in our personal lives or national lives or whatever. So I use this tool each time in another area, and it seems to be adding to me. At the beginning, it was single moms, then youth at risk, then Holocaust survivors, then the Arab-Jewish conflict. In the last few years, it's sexual harassment in the Messianic body. So it's a different side of the brokenness that he wants to turn to the husband, to the healer, to the son of righteousness. And I study it. I take care of a few people who in their lives are struggling in that area. And then I recruit prayer and teach about it.
Sure. And it's amazing to see how, as he has many faces, he used you in the many areas as well, in different seasons, to reach his entire body so that everyone in the body can see where the true redemption lies. Thank you so much for your time today, Orna, and we're looking forward to the series ahead. So you can follow Orna's YouTube channel for teachings as well. I've posted it on the chat, and you can also visit her website, ornagrinman.com. I'll post it it's in the chat, but I'll post it on the YouTube recording as well. And you can also send her an email. I'll post that as well. But before we close, any questions from any of the attendees for Orna? Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions. I just see, okay, that was just comments on everyone joining. And then you can also reach out to Marinda. I'll also post her details quickly in the chat, but also in the recording below. She has stock in South Africa of his Faces book as well.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Orna. Have a beautiful day. Orna, would you mind just maybe praying for us before we close?
Do you want me to do that in Hebrew?
Yes, please.
אבא, אתה הבועז שלנו, אתה פתחת לרווחה את ביתך, שלחת קוצרים לשדה, והזמנת לשם גם את רות וגם את נעמי מכל העמים. תודה שעשית את זה, תודה שאתה עדיין עושה את זה, תודה שאתה רוקם את הלבבות ביחד, ואני מבקשת, אבא, משיכה וחוכמה, והמון הזדמנויות, אבא, גם ליהודים וגם לגויים, למצוא לא רק בעצמנו לבדנו את הדרך אל ביתך, אלא זה לצד זה, לעיני העולם כולו, שרעב לרעות מהסוג הזה. וישוע, אני שוב מודה לך על המחיר שאתה שילמת, כדי לאפשר את סופו של המסע הזה. תודה.
Thank you so much, Orna. We appreciate you, and we appreciate the journey that's lying ahead. Thank you, Abba. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
להתראות. See you.
Shalom.
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 Bye.